The amygdala is the part of the brain that detects things that are scary and dangerous. The prefrontal cortex regulates the stress response by making things seem less scary. When we perceive a threat as real, the amygdala triggers our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses. In turn, the hypothalamus wakes up the pituitary gland. Hormones from the pituitary tell the adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline. These two travel into the blood and tell the other parts of the body to react to stress. Adrenaline and cortisol have physiological responses in the body. These can include an increased heart rate, increased respiration, or holding of the breath. Your pupils might dilate to let in more light, which increases your peripheral vision in case you need to flee. Your hearing becomes sharper, your blood thickens, preparing the body for physical injury, and there might be a temporary reduction of pain perception. Goosebumps may form on your skin. You might begin to sweat or turn pale in color, and as blood increases in major muscles, your hands and feet might go cold. Physiological reactions are triggered by a psychological fear. This is an important response to danger as it ensures our survival. This fear is conditioned, which means you've associated a situation or thing with a prior negative experience or experiences. This psychological response is initiated when you're first exposed to a situation and develops over time. Prolonged stress can keep the body in this state, believing we have to be ready to fight or flee for our life on a regular basis, and this can be known as chronic anxiety. It now becomes a perceived threat rather than a real one, and yet the body responds the same. Perceived threats are different for everyone. When faced with a perceived threat, the brain thinks it's in danger because it already views this sensation as life-threatening, and your body responds accordingly. Specific physiological responses depend on how each person responds to stress. For example, when I was a gymnast, the fear of getting hurt was important, so I didn't do anything dangerous to hurt myself. When I psychologically did not feel safe, it was a signal that I may need to do more preparation work, so the motor pathways in my brain were solid before performing new skills. At one point, I had a coach who, as a form of motivation, would often yell to push us to do skills that we were psychologically scared of performing and that we may not have been ready to do. He also threatened us with removal from his group if we didn't comply. This triggered the fear response in my brain, which activated the freeze response to this perceived threat. If I didn't do what this person told me, I wouldn't be able to keep doing what I loved, gymnastics. Then I would freeze and not be able to do anything at all. This also led to me developing a fawn response where I would do things to please others in order to head off a perceived threat. Of course, this doesn't work. No one can ever please someone enough to stop them from being abusive. This response carried out into my adult life whenever I perceived a threat of something being taken away from me, whether it was in my relationships, my career, or even when I needed to make a decision that was best for myself. I would freeze at the thought of making a decision because of the perceived threat that I would lose something else that I loved if I made the decision. Physically, I would feel frozen in my head or my solar plexus and sometimes unable to breathe and feeling incapable of making a decision. This constant stress on my body led to chronic anxiety. I would even wake in the middle of the night and have to make plans upon plans for perceived threats that didn't exist. Over time, my nervous system was primed to accept this type of energy, and often I would attract people or situations that reinforced this feeling. Any challenge to my perception made me feel unsafe until I was ready to challenge this for myself. It became exhausting to put myself through this cycle over and over. Through hypnotherapy and other modalities, I was able to reframe this perceived threat in my subconscious so it no longer had any physiological response in my body. This happened over time and over a few sessions because there were a few emotional responses attached to it. The desire to feel worthy, the need to please others, and that I can't take steps forward in my life to do something as I perceived I would lose something else if I did. By getting to the root cause of the perceived emotional threat, I reclaimed my life and my energy. And if any of this resonates with you, reach out to me to see how I can help.